It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage.
History is written in stone, but some stories are cut so deep, so precisely, that they defy the timeline of human innovation. When Graham Hancock first walked into the heart of Egypt's granite quarries, he wasn't looking for what was there, he was looking for what shouldn't be. For centuries, the academic consensus has been clear. The wonders of the Old Kingdom were built using copper chisels, stone pounders, and sheer human will. But when you run your hand along the walls of the ancient temples, the tactile reality tells a different story. The stone here isn't just cut, it appears machined. The grooves are curved, rhythmic, and agonizingly precise, suggesting a tool that moved with a speed and stability that no human hand could maintain. For decades, these were dismissed as primitive scratch marks. But a growing coalition of engineers and independent researchers argues that we are looking at the fingerprints of a lost technology. This is the story of the impossible cuts, the story of a civilization that may have inherited a science we are only just beginning to understand. The mystery begins in plain sight, inside the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Tucked away among the chaotic relics of the Old Kingdom sits an unfinished sarcophagus. To the casual tourist, it is just another stone coffin. But to an engineer, it is a smoking gun. Carved from a single massive block of red Aswan granite, the inner chamber of this box offers a frozen snapshot of an ancient industrial process. The walls are smooth, the corners are sharp, but it is the tool marks that stop you cold. Granite is an igneous rock composed of quartz, feldspar, and mica. On the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, it ranks a 6 or 7. Copper, the metal supposedly used to shape this box, ranks a mere 3. In the physics of material science, you cannot cut a harder material with a softer one. Egyptologists argue that the ancients used copper saws in conjunction with sand, essentially using the copper to rub abrasive quartz particles against the stone. It is a valid theory for rough shaping, but look closer at the sarcophagus. The interior reveals deep, symmetrical curves and right angles that suggest a rigid, mechanized guidance system. Researchers analyzing the unfinished cuts found perfectly circular striations, fine spiral lines wrapping around the interior corners. These are not the erratic scratches of a handsaw moving back and forth. These are concentric, evenly spaced grooves consistent with a rotary tool. The spacing suggests a continuous, high-velocity motion. To replicate this today, we would use a computer-controlled mill. To suggest that craftsmen 4,500 years ago achieved this with a copper blade and wet sand isn't just optimistic. According to engineers like Christopher Dunn, it is mechanically impossible. To understand why, we have to look at the debris they left behind. We have to look at the cores. In the early 1880s, the father of modern archaeology, Sir Flinders Petrie, began collecting curious stone cylinders scattered across Giza. These were drill cores, the waste product left behind when a hollow tube drill bores into stone. Petrie, a man of meticulous measurement, was baffled. He noted that the spiral grooves on these cores were perfectly uniform. Fast forward to the modern era, and engineer Christopher Dunn took Petrie's observations into the laboratory. What he found changed the conversation entirely. Dunn measured the distance between the spiral grooves, known as the feed rate, the distance the drill sinks into the stone with each revolution. The measurements were staggering. The data indicated that the ancient drills were advancing into solid granite at a rate of 0.1 inches, 1/10 of an inch per revolution. To put that into perspective, modern diamond-tipped core drills spinning at high RPMs cut through granite by grinding it as fine dust. They advance slowly. The ancient drills, however, were plowing through the quartz crystal. This requires a distinct combination: immense downward pressure and consistent rotational torque. If you attempt this with a hand-turned copper tube and sand, the sand is crushed instantly, and the copper binds or bends. You cannot generate the pressure required to cut a spiral groove of that depth by hand. The physics demands a rigid machine.
Skeptics have tried to reproduce these cores. Using copper tubes, weights, and quartz sand, they have spent hours drilling mere millimeters. The resulting holes are tapered and rough, the striations chaotic. The ancient cores, by contrast, are parallel-sided and uniform. The implications are unsettling. If the feed rate is accurate, the ancient Egyptians possessed a method of drilling that moved faster and cleaner than anything we had until the industrial age. And yet, not a single machine, not a single diamond drill bit has ever been found. We are left with the product, but the process remains a ghost. To see the scale of this ambition, one must travel 500 miles south of Giza to the quarries of Aswan. Here lies the unfinished obelisk, a monolith that, had it been raised, would have weighed 1,200 tons. It lies abandoned, still attached to the bedrock, surrounded by a narrow trench. This trench is the battlefield of the archaeological debate. The walls of the trench are covered in strange scoop-like marks. The official story is that these were made by dolerite pounders, balls of hard volcanic rock found at the site. The theory suggests that armies of workers stood in this cramped space, bashing the granite to dust, millimeter by millimeter, for years. But step inside the trench, and the theory begins to crumble. The space is barely 2 feet wide. There is no room to swing a hammer, let alone generate the force needed to pulverize granite. Graham Hancock once said, "It doesn't look like chipping, it looks like scooping. It looks like a giant cheese grater was applied to the rock." The marks are smooth and curved. They run in parallel lines, often diving under the curve of the obelisk itself, a physical impossibility for a man pounding a stone from above. Christopher Dunn suggests these marks are consistent with a massive belt-driven grinding wheel or a sonic drilling device mounted on a rig. The uniformity of the scoops implies a guided tool. The distinct lack of shock fractures in the stone suggests the material was not hammered, but abraded or sliced. We are looking at a mechanized quarry, stripped of its machinery, leaving only the scars of industry on the walls. If Aswan is the mine, the Serapeum is the showroom. Hidden beneath the sands of Saqqara is a labyrinth of tunnels housing over 20 granite boxes. Each weighs roughly 70 tons, with lids weighing another 30 tons. They were carved from single blocks of granodiorite and transported into these cramped alcoves. We are told they were tombs for the sacred Apis bulls. Yet, when opened, the boxes were empty. No bulls, no mummies, just the void. But the true anomaly is the precision. When engineers bring precision straight edges and corner gauges into the Serapeum, the results are baffling. The inside surfaces of these boxes are flat to within 2/10,000ths of an inch. This is the tolerance of modern optical equipment, not Bronze Age masonry. The corners are perfect 90-degree angles. The surfaces are polished to a mirror finish. To achieve this level of flatness requires a technology known as surface plates, heavy, rigid tables used in aerospace engineering. Why go to such extreme lengths for a bull's coffin? Why engineer a box with airtight tolerances in a pitch-black tunnel where no one would ever see it? The craftsmanship suggests function, not just ritual. The boxes in the Serapeum are not merely containers. They are engineered objects. And like the drill cores, their existence creates a paradox. We have the finished product of a space-age civilization sitting in the ruins of the Bronze Age.
For decades, this debate was a stalemate. The eyes of engineers versus the textbooks of historians. But new technology is finally breaking the deadlock. In a landmark 2025 study, Researchers utilized next-generation laser scanning and microtopography imaging to map the geometry of the granite cores and the serapeum walls. The results provided the mathematical confirmation that Hancock and Dunn had long waited for. The scans revealed that the spiral grooves on the drill cores followed a perfect helical geometry, a pattern that cannot be created by human irregularity. The feed rate was confirmed to be uniform, implying a tool that held steady RPMs under immense load. Furthermore, high-resolution analysis of the trench walls at Aswan detected microscopic variations consistent with high-frequency vibration. This was not the work of pounding stones. It was the signature of resonant cutting, technology that uses sound and vibration to disintegrate rock. The data points to an inescapable conclusion. The dynastic Egyptians, brilliant as they were, may have been the custodians of these sites, not the originators. They may have built around and on top of the works of the first time, Zep Tepi. The tools are missing because they didn't belong to the pharaohs. They belonged to a time before history began. Graham Hancock's theory asks us to accept a difficult premise, that the timeline of human history is broken, that we are a species with amnesia, walking among the ruins of a forgotten greatness. The evidence is not found in manuscripts, which can burn, or in pottery, which can break. It is locked in the one medium that endures. Granite is stubborn. It does not lie. It preserves the force used against it. The impossible cuts in Egypt serve as a message from the deep past, telling us that we were not the first to master the earth. As the laser scans of 2025 peel back the layers of time, the silence of the stones is finally ending. The tools may be gone, but the signature remains, and it reads, "We were here, and we knew more than you think."